back, everyone, to Requiem Radio. This is season 4, and with me today, I have a co-host who's filling in. You're going to be seeing a lot more of him in season 5, but we have Pablo with us. Hey, Pablo, quick intro.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Pablo. I usually go by the name John on the internet, but yeah, it can go either way. But yeah, I'm a friend of Sola's. We both, hang out around here in the state of Georgia. Yeah, pretty much, now I'm just filling in the spots here and there for the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, he's already been a returning face before. He's been on 2 episodes already on Thomistic Thought and also on Political Theory, but good to have him as soon to be a regular of the show for hosting. And with that, we have our special guest today who is really passionate about AI and is ready to explain it to some people who aren't familiar with it. So really looking forward to that. Our guest today is Anthony Sepulveda. Hey, how you doing tonight?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on. So would you care to do a quick intro about yourself, Anthony? Like explain a little bit about what you do and what got you into the subject?
Yeah, sure. Well, I own an IT company, a little IT company, nothing too crazy. IT/IoT, IoT standing for Internet of Things. And we try to stay as much as we can, at least, on the cutting edge of technology. And when GPT came out, we got on the bandwagon and started to learn a lot about it. And we are using it on a daily basis. And we're doing some things now that we just wouldn't have had the manpower to do prior to these new tools we have today. So yeah, using AI on a consistent basis, and then also building AI models, training AI models with the plans of reselling said AI trained models to customers as we go along.
Okay, and what got you into the subject matter? Like, what was the first time you heard about AI? We're like, what is this? And got you interested in it?
You hear about it. I mean, as a kid, it's the Terminator, right? And then, with me being in tech, I've always kind of read it was just science fiction for a while, but was interesting. I like sci-fi. When GPT came out, it caught everybody by surprise. And when I started testing it and playing with it, I was amazed with the stuff that it can do. And I like most people started off not really knowing how to prompt it. I was using it to just reword emails for me or articulate emails for me. But now we're using it for things like coding. We're automating a lot of processes and things that we do throughout the day. We're probably one of the coolest projects we're working on with it is I mentioned that we do IoT. So IoT, Internet of Things, are essentially sensor environments all around you could place them anywhere. I mean, there's refrigerators schools and restaurants use it to automatically log temperature, heat indexes inside walk-ins and reach-in coolers in their kitchens. So prior to these sensors, they were doing this manually, literally on a piece of paper. So we sell these sensors that automate that. There's these gateways that connect these IoT solutions, and these gateways are typically connected through a cellular carrier. So we have like 25, we're building an e-commerce site, could never have done this without AI. Just would have been too expensive. I mean, 100,000 plus to do this kind of project. And we have all 2,500 products. These are all products that are certified on either Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile. And this does not exist. Well, hopefully now that I'm putting it out there, someone doesn't beat us to the punch because we're still in development. But it's an e-commerce store with, think ChatGPT as a chatbot, only said chat model is trained on every data sheet and user guide for every single product that's on the that we're selling. So nowadays, when you go on Amazon and you're looking at something, you ask a question, you have to wait for the seller to get back to you. Chatbots today are just not that smart. Now we're able with AI to put this, to give you a chatbot that you can actually communicate with 24/7 and get directions on how to configure this or how to do that, or what's a good recommended solution for this problem. And it's something that we're doing this for ourselves, but while we're doing this, we're learning how to train AI models like Llama 3, and we're learning how to, there's just the value proposition there is huge for every business that exists. You have a website, having a 24/7 agent that's trained on your help desk tickets and all of your product spec data sheets and all of your user manuals. It's just something that doesn't really exist out there right now, and we hope to be one of the first or early folks to offer that type of product.
Okay, and before we get deeper into weeds, for some of our audience at home, they may be curious, what even is AI? Some people think it's just an algorithm. Other people think it has sentience. Do you want to clear up some rumors or misconceptions about it? And you could explain what it is for someone who may be unfamiliar with it?
Yeah, it's a calculator. It's just a fancy calculator. It's a tool. When it comes to art, it's a medium. It's not. It doesn't say that it may not ever get to that point. There. Once we get, and we'll discuss that a little further down the road. It could advance. Is likely to advance to be smarter than humans at some point. But it's a tool that's designed to help us do everything better. Prior to AI, we had the internet, right? Or I should say, we had smartphones. There was a time where everybody I remember I was working at AT&T, and people would come in. We had the folks that loved the iPhone, always had to have their iPhone, and then we had a good bit of folks that just wanted their texting phone or their messaging or their flip phone, and they didn't want to deal with the extra $30 on their plan. So there was a time where you had your early adopters, and then you had your folks that just resisted new technology. Now everybody has a smartphone. AI is a similar tool, probably the biggest one we've ever had, the biggest jump we've ever had. It's bigger than the internet. You're now enabling the internet. I mean, if the internet was a Ford Model T, now we're driving around in cyber trucks, if you will, with AI, and where that's going to be going. It's not as it doesn't have the same ambitions that humans have. So it's not sentient. So it really is just a calculator. It's a very extremely smart Google search engine, if you will. Prior to ChatGPT and models like that, you'd go to Google and you type in what you want, and you'd have to search through 10 different pages to find the thing that you're looking for. Now you can just ask a question and get the answer that you want.
Okay, and if you're familiar with this, I'm curious, would you happen to know who were the first people who pioneered AI? And how have we seen it grown from, like you said earlier, it being a fictional thing in sci-fi like Skynet to being a reality? Like, what led AI to where it is today? Would you happen to know that?
A little bit. I've read that the folks that were thinking of this in the 60s actually were inspired by Aristotle, of all people. I know, you guys edit that one out. You guys are really big on philosophy with what you do on this show, and you're what's the term that was used? Associationism, I believe, is what he uses. And it's just the idea of connecting different ideas to come up with a solution. So I'll give you an example. So you know cancer's bad, and too much sun can cause cancer. So that the third idea is that if you put on sunscreen, it can protect your skin and prevent said bad thing. So your mind knows all of these different ideas and to put together a solution to keep you safe, because the other fourth idea is, you want to live. So models are the same. There's connecting dots. The neural network is a lot of different ideas, and it reasons through all the information data that's given to it. I think there was a guy, Frank Rosenblatt, in 57. He actually tried to get a computer. He called it Perceptron, which is I always liked and memorized because I was thinking of Megatron.
Yeah.
Megatron, Perceptron. Yeah, so he was trying to teach this computer that back in 1957 to identify, to be able to tell the difference between a man and a woman's picture. And it didn't work out. Like they didn't have computers strong enough back then to do that. But they understood early on what was eventually going to happen. I think I don't remember exactly. It was sometime in the 80s. There was a guy named Jeffrey Hinton, and he's known as the father of AI. He actually stuck with it when it was. I mean, he was getting shunned for many years because just no one thought it was ever actually going to be a thing. But he stuck with it. He had the idea of deep learning and these multi-layered neural networks. So if Rosenblatt's initial plan, think of it as a single-story house, Hinton had the idea of building a skyscraper and using, just to go back to my earlier analogy, all of those different dots, if you will, all the different ideas to reason. The bigger, the taller you make it, the bigger the more rooms, the more it's easier the more it reasons, the more it can figure out.
Yeah, it's a form of Aristotelian logic that I really like about. That's interesting. I didn't know that though. But you're going to say something else as well?
Yeah. So I mean, this is the 80s when Hinton was doing this, and then the 90s he was getting shunned on it, and in 2012 they started to do more with AI, and it wasn't until GPT came out that it just took everyone by surprise. Even the folks at OpenAI, they weren't expecting it to do as well as it did. There's a good a story about this where they taught this AI machine to play a game, and I can't remember the name of the game, that it was something like chess, and they thought it would take years for this thing to be able to beat the grandmaster of said game, and it did it in 3 days. So it's learning faster than we expect it to learn, which is there's pros and cons to that, and I believe that it's going to be far more pros than cons, but like nuclear energy and nuclear power, there's pros and cons to that. And, we will get more into those said pros and cons, I guess, as we go, but it's definitely, something it's an inevitability that we have to be careful with how we roll it out, but it's happening, and it's a race. It's a race.
It's funny how you mentioned earlier about the chess thing, because the last human to beat a chess engine was Garry Kasparov, and he held the world champion for 20 years, I believe, the longest reigning champion, and Magnus Carlsen may beat him soon, but during that time, because this chess bot was destroying like grandmasters left and right, when he finally played it, he was very patient and he watched his games, and he was able to make certain moves, and eventually, I hate to say the word error 404, but the bot responded more sporadic moves until eventually he was able to beat it. And the creator of the chess engine, which is known as Deep Blue, asked him, "How would you do it?" And he responded with, "Your machine thinks 6 moves ahead. I had to start thinking 7. And I just thought that was one of the coolest quotes ever of like how to beat it. But yeah, it's interesting watching how AI is taken off, especially with like chess engines, for example. Like there's tons of them, like AlphaZero, Stockfish, Kimona, and the practicabilities are endless, where it's even asking the question, can AI solve chess? And I know that may sound silly, but in a way, chess is a very algorithmic, logical game to a sense. There are objectively better moves and worse moves. So I'm interested to see what comes out from that. But John, you wanted to ask a question?
It was more of a short comment because I got interested in when he mentioned Aristotle and sort of his relation to the coming of AI, at least in thought. Because at least in some of the discussions that we have in the philosophy circles on Twitter of all places, sometimes we bring this subject up, and it usually comes down to like a lot of speculation, but we usually try to go back to the basics, and a lot of it with the help of like people like Professor John Boyer, who has been at the podcast before. He's a philosophy professor, and we always try to just give what would be like the Aristotelian account of what it means for there to be intelligence in the first place, so as to know exactly how to guide most of the discussion. But I do have like an interest in looking more into that sort of the origins of AI there, and see what is the relation of Aristotle more clearly. That caught my eye there. Yeah.
No, that was definitely something very interesting. I'd read in more too.
Associationism is the concept that inspired the thoughts. It gave birth to the idea of neural networks.
Earlier in this episode, you did mention that, like all things, it has its pros and cons. I'm curious to know, from your personal opinion, how do you balance the benefits of AI with some of its potential risk that's being faced?
Well, it's a lot like any other technology that we come out with, guys. It's you think about cars. There was a time where everyone wanted their horse, and they didn't want to deal with this Ford. They made fun of the guy with the Ford. There was just this period of time where just everyone did not believe these cars were going to take off. Now they look at you weird if you're driving down the street or going down the street in a horse. I think after that, we had the Industrial Revolution, right? And then you had computers in the 80s. What's that?
I said electricity is another example. When I came around, there was a lot of anti-electricity stuff. Like they'd make newspapers showing a bunch of wires grabbing people, or saying electricity causes more house fires than like lamp and oil.
Yeah. And the 80s and 90s, I remember there was a time where, and this is before y'all's time, but you had resumes that people used to actually have to put computer skills as a thing on their resume, because in the 80s and 90s, people were resistant. They didn't want to get a computer. They didn't care about a computer. They thought the computer was the enemy and that it was going to end the world. And it's one thing after another, right? Smartphones were the same thing. People didn't want to deal with smartphones, as I mentioned earlier. And now nobody, you have to have one for work. You can't have employees without smartphones these days. It's just not something that's possible. And AI is going to be the same thing. You right now, the guys that work for me, it's mandatory that they use it. And we're going through training platforms like Zapier to automate it. Everyone's got their own AI model downloaded to their computer. That I'll give you an example. I have a spreadsheet. I have spreadsheets that get sent to me every month. I have to open that email. I have to download the spreadsheet. I have to take that data and do something with it. So I have to configure the data, move it around. There's several things that I have to do there within that data, and I have to send that data to a third party. And I automate that now. So what used to take me hours to do, now it's just automatically done. It's kind of like an automatic email when you send it, when you contact a company on their chat, on their contact us page, and you get we just got your message. We'll get back to you in 2 to 3 days. now these kind of tasks are just getting automated. When we're building code for something, it's I don't know anything about code, zero code actually. But if I say I want to be able to do this, how do I do that? It gives me what it is that I need to do, and it walks you through it. It says download VS Code, and every single step of it you don't have to know. I would never have been able to do that. And forgive me, I feel like I'm missing a point. Can you repeat your earlier question?
Yeah, I was asking, what overall do you see is the balance that you have to have between the benefits of AI and the risk that it poses? So to go a bit more deeper, we could agree, for example, like Ford or electricity or all these things, but do you think we'll eventually hit a point where technology has gone too far, where this can be an actual threat? Because the prior examples of, like, let's say a car or electricity could be seen as more beneficiary, while a lot of critiques of AI is that this is more of a replacement. And that's what a lot of people are worried about.
Yeah. Well, you look at nuclear power, when I don't know if y'all saw Oppenheimer, but there was a race going on there. And the ultimate AI is going to be built one way or another. So that's the first thing that I think you have to start with, that kind of notion. You have understanding whether, if we pull back on it and stop and do all of these things that folks want us to do, let's say we do that. Well, guess what's going to happen? China and Russia are already doing it. China's like 6 months behind us. I watched an interview the other day from the head. They actually have, which I wish we had here, a government position where, defense, we have the Secretary of Defense here. They have the equivalent of AI, the main guy in the government that's over AI, and they have more data than us because they're a police state, right? They're censoring everything, so they're working on it. They're trying to beat us, and if we don't, thankfully we're in the lead right now. But if we don't do everything we can to be the best and reach AGI before they do, there's dangers to that. So yeah, things can get hacked, right? It's a lot easier to, if you build an AI model that, the same way I mentioned that automated process earlier, they build an AI model that automatically, hacks into things. That's not a good situation for us. So it's more of there is I don't want to say a Cold War. I guess you can call it a Cold War going on right now with everybody. And thankfully we got a huge lead. We do have a huge lead. It's an inevitability. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to crash the world. I wouldn't even, no more than nuclear power did. Right, we used it, or at least atomic bombs in World War II, and there's been nuclear testing after the fact. But it's a similar thing. There's a lot of power that's provided, a lot of things that nuclear power has done good for humanity. But there is that aspect to it that it could destroy the world, and AI is going to be similar or bigger than that. You're talking about, you just think about anything you can imagine, it's going to be able to do. We've mapped the human genome, but we don't know what each, there's 25,000 pieces of code in the human genome. We don't know what each one of those does. Right. We are at maybe a handful that we've identified through all of our research and science. AI is going to be able to map the entire thing. It's going to be able to develop drugs. It's going to be able to, do stuff that we can't even fathom right now. It's a real, I don't know what I don't know kind of scenario. We can imagine a lot, and it's going to help us truly reach our whatever we can dream. But there's going to be a lot of it that's going to come out of it too that we hadn't even thought about. And probably the biggest application for a positive in this with AI is going to be medicine. It's going to be, you're talking about even politics, man. Even politics. There's so much that that folks have their identity based around the party that they identify with. With AI, you're able to say, here's a policy situation. How would you handle this? And it's unbiased. And what I found the times that I've tried this, it's actually giving both sides of the aisle ideas. It's I find this way, at least with politics, a lot today. I believe in. I agree with half of what they say, and I disagree with the other half, and that's how I feel with both sides of the aisle. And AI is just an unbiased collection of knowledge that's going to provide us a solution that to actually fix without having to worry about upsetting somebody. This is just the reality. This is the correct answer. 2 + 2 is 4.
You mentioned earlier that people used to be resistant about tech coming in and all that, like the computer. I'm kind of sort of reminded of and this was a bit not before my time, but I was too young to remember Y2K and the sort of the beginning.
Yeah.
I get recounts of these areas by my family members about how they were planning out, for example, to leave the country and go somewhere a bit much more remote and all that. Mm-hmm. I remember people that this was a real hysteria by at least certain people and all that. And but I always kind of think about it. I do have my own hysterias when it comes to new tech and the way that it goes, the way that people get adjusted at first to it, because usually it's going back a bit to the car example, it's there's the car, but then there's the car crash. And so there needs to be means or measures to kind of fix this. I think that in a certain sense, one can conceive of that. With AI, you can have some of the problems that you mentioned there. For example, hacking could be much more accessible. But even then, when you get these new techs, there's also new sort of ways of trying to figure out how to mitigate some of those problems along the way, and sort of trying to get adjusted from there on. And usually the issue that I take on tech is mostly the sort of the mass availability that it comes to at first for people. And that's kind of where I see a lot of the problems, that you sometimes give tools to people, but they don't know how to actually use them. And it becomes very difficult to kind of try to account for, trying to mitigate some of those problems. But that's my sort of my opinion in regards to some of the, even though I don't know much about AI myself, I just have this opinion about all tech about that. Yeah.
I feel it the same way I feel when I go in public and I see a parent giving an iPad to their 3-year-old kid, and I watch as this kid mindlessly just scrolls like that, where I think to myself, there can't be a healthy implication of giving this to people. And I feel about AI the same way I feel about iPhones. I think there should be a certain measure where a person should have their own formed knowledge before accessing this, because the last thing I want is, for example, a 2-year-old, or let's say a pre-K student using ChatGPT to look up what is 2 + 2, where they have their entire life no actual form reasoning or knowledge. They're simply just so used to using an AI to basically shape every single little detail of their life. I could see that as being a dangerous thing for a younger generation who has this tool at their fingertips. Even
we
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that's in my opinion an inevitability. It's a hard word for me to say today. You think about autocorrect. Does anybody really know how to spell as well as they used to back in the day prior to autocorrect? That's kind of taken away of some spelling, but we're faster. We type more though. We read more. One could argue that cell phones that kids today read way more than they have done ever because of texting alone. You're just getting used to tools that this generation has tools that we didn't have, and they're going to grow up with this. Now, there are tools to identify when someone's cheating. You still have in-person testing, so you might get away with it on your homework, but when it comes time to do that thing in class, you're not going to, it's going to be obvious if you don't know it.
Exactly. And if I could share a personal example of that as well, recently I was completing some exams for my college courses, and I was studying in psychology. And I had to write a 6-page paper on like the founders of like psychology. I spent 2 weeks doing my research, writing about this, and a week later, I'm waiting for the grades to come in, and there's a 0 in a grade book, and I'm like, "What's going on?" I see an email by my professor saying, "Hey, we just flagged you for cheating. You were using AI during this." And I was confused. I'm like, I wasn't using AI at all. And the teacher showed me, she plugged my entire essay into like it's called like ChatGPT 0. And of the 6 pages of that essay, one sentence came up to match perfectly with a sentence from an essay that was written in 2003 in Zimbabwe. And I had to ask my professor, what do you think is more reasonable? That I spent an entire 6-page essay writing this, and I used one sentence from this paper in 2003 from Zimbabwe, or that I genuinely wrote this paper. And I was able to argue, make a case for myself, showing that I wasn't using AI to cheat. And later, that professor actually apologized to me, and they said, like, I'm sorry for like overreacting. And you just don't understand how bad it is right now at a college level, how many people are cheating and using AI left and right, where all these professors are on edge, basically, where it's almost like they're overshooting at this point. It's getting frustrating because it feels like the people who are doing an honest day's work are getting cheated out for the people who are cutting corners. Does that make sense?
Well, my opinion on that would be that the education system has not adapted to AI. Calculators. There was a time where you weren't allowed to use calculators in class, and that may still even be the case earlier on for elementary kids these days. But they've got a little more lax on calculators. I believe that AI should be completely integrated into schools. Why are we not already doing that? In my opinion, this is the now. There's other countries that are doing this. We're falling behind by not using AI. And what I mean by that is not that I'm going to have AI write this paper for me. What I'm going to say is you change your education system to verify competency in person, but use AI. Okay, I'm going to write this paper. I'm going to upload this paper into ChatGPT, and hey, how would you have made this better? Those kind of things are going to help. I mean, I do that now with my emails. If I'm emailing a customer, or if I'm emailing a vendor or a partner, I'll type up this email and then I'll just ask GPT, hey, how would you improve this email? And it gives me something else, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even have thought to do that. And I forgot that part. That makes perfect sense. And it's a way of getting better faster, just like you would use a calculator to check your work. There's a lot of applications to it in school. I mean, even teachers, your lesson plan, you can upload an entire book to GPT. We're going to work on this chapter. Give me ways my students can use AI to learn this chapter, to learn the contents of this chapter. It's going to give you ways that it can help with learning. I've learned way more since I started my ability to learn, or my speed in which I have learned things, I should say, has gone up tremendously since I started using GPT or all of these AI models. I mean, I went from not knowing how to do any kind of coding to now we're training AI models like in a year.
That's definitely a big leap, and I appreciate your thoughts on maybe its education system, which I'd agree on that should get with the times. Yeah, and I know it's not easy to say, especially for a lot of like professors or teachers, academics, but there is going to come a time where you either sink or swim, if you will. But you're going to say something, John?
Yeah, no, it's more just like, trying to figure out how to get adjusted appropriately to it before it would sort of get it's already in a sense getting out of hand here and there. It's not like it's a crisis on its own and all that. But, it's just a matter of like, trying to figure out ways to teach people to not simply just outsource every single aspect of their abilities to this. Just going back to the example of the calculator, just using it for 1 + 1. That's one way that things can get out of hand. But with AI, it's more just It's more just trying the same way that we're going to be dealing with like cars. People need to get a license. People need to learn the basics of driving safely and all that.
Yeah.
Stuff. A similar sort of principle applies here in the same. And I think that as it is to get it integrated, especially in the education field. I'm not in the education field myself, although I do have family members that are and were on it. And but it is it is conceivable. That's what I'm saying. It is conceivable to see this sort of like an adjustment and sort of a proper ethic alongside with it. It's not as though you just simply give them like that and then you just tell them to figure out. That's where it gets problematic. In the sense of people just simply outsourcing everything. Outsourcing, for example, the whole essay situation that you find with some English professors, or even for in the science or field, like the lab reports and all that for that matter. Because there's going to be a point where when they outsource all that stuff, all the the sort of the capacity to be able to reason out problems and all that is just going to be lost for them. And yeah, of course, it's not like we all know that school is not 100% representative of what you're going to do actually in real life, but still, it's like the reasoning skills and all that stuff needs to be preserved as like these things develop along the way. Yeah,
you don't want your neurosurgeon to be the guy who used ChatGPT all throughout college. No one wants to be on the operating table with that guy.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you're going to have. Look, you neurosurgeons have, and you know what's crazy before I say my next point, when you go to school, medical school, you're passing with, I think it takes like an 80 or 90 to pass. So if you think about the neurosurgeon example you just gave, the guy who's doing brain surgery on you did not get a 100 the entire time that he was going to school. So you're dealing with a guy that he's in your brain, and even if he got a 90, that's like one of the best grade, one of the highest average scores of doctors in general. I only know this because I have some friends that are in the medical industry, and the 90 is just we could probably GPT it and get the exact number. But for those of y'all that are listening, feel free to do so. And let's look at it. It might be lower, but it's not as accurate or as exact as what a computer can do. And that's the thing that I think we have to start to get to realize we've already been at this. We've already adjusted to these kind of things in the past. And for teachers that are struggling with this, it's a lack of knowledge on their end. They really should be talking to GPT and saying, here's the problem that I have. What are some ways we can adjust our curriculum to solve this issue? And it'll do that. You want to leverage AI. You don't have guys, when you're teaching advanced math in high school or college, they encourage you have to use calculators. I don't even know what class it is, but I remember when I was in high school, I had to buy this stupid calculator for $100. You guys remember that stupid calculator? Like, you can't even do the class without this calculator, right?
We got to
Why
get
are we not doing
the TI-80? I think it was like, yeah.
So that's how things are now. Like, we're able to do things so much faster than we used to. And to your point, Pablo, you still need to be able to think. So you need to have deductive reasoning classes. I think it opens us up more for stuff that we are not teaching now that we should be teaching in school, like how to file your taxes, financial stuff. But there's it's just complete, and it's because they don't know how to use it, and they're not. They need more folks teaching teachers and school districts on how to solve these problems. Right now, they're thinking they're doing it the old way. They're trying to figure out the problem on their own, whereas they should be using the tools that are available to them to help solve these problems that they're experiencing. And it's a matter of adjusting your curriculum. You're having to redo things now. You're having to completely think differently, just like we did with the calculator. Prior to that T9 calculator, what is it, a T9?
Yeah.
What was the name of this calculator?
Like, was it a TI-80 or something like that?
Whatever that thing was. Yeah, prior to that, they did, how many years do you think the math teachers fought against using that calculator? I'm sure they didn't just, the first time it came out, oh yeah, we're gonna use this calculator. It's a great idea. No, there were probably years or decades where they were like, no, you're not allowed to use this, right? Because if you do that, you're not going to be smart. No, dude, we just got a lot more efficient. We are learning faster. We're using the tools that are given to us we invented the wheel so we can go faster, so we can get things done faster. We're not going to pick up all this wood and walk it back and forth because, we're going to lose strength if we don't pick up all this wood and walk it back and forth from the woods to the house. You invent the wheel so you can get better, so you can do more, accomplish more. We're trying to go to the stars, guys.
What I like to hear. And we're getting close to going up on our quick break for sponsorship and advertisement. But before we do, you did mention something earlier in the podcast I had to write down because it was interesting. But as you were describing this pseudo Cold War of AI, you mentioned it was a race to achieve AGI. Could you explain to the audience what is AGI? Like, is this the end all be all for AI, or what is it?
No. AGI is getting closer to that. Singularity is if you were to call it the end all be all. AGI is a much smarter version. It's when AI gets to the point where it is as smart as a human. It's already getting really close to that, but you're talking about more than just writing code. I mean, you're able to. It passes the bar exam now. It passes medical exams now. But we haven't reached AGI yet. AGI, you're going to be able to have an AI assistant, and you guys are in the podcasting business. And and at some point you have to edit and you have to do all these different things to your audio. You're going to be able to say, "Hey, I need you to do this," and it's just going to do it, and it's going to be able to think on its own all the steps that it needs to do the thing that you just asked it to do, right? Singularity is when you get to the point where it's smarter than humans, and now it's building itself, similar to Skynet. But it doesn't. It's without the nefarious. Let's just destroy all the humans. It doesn't have the same. It doesn't have these. But it could. If programmed, that's where. Nuclear power plants, they could explode if we don't have the safeguards in place to prevent it from exploding, right? So there's a certain level of there's going to be people at the top that are, I believe in the Second Amendment, but I don't believe that we should all be walking around with nukes on our backs either, right? So there'll be somebody or a group of folks, governments, whatever you call them, Illuminati, or some that are into this conspiracy stuff, that are creating these safeguards, and it's open. That's what GPT is not, but what Meta's doing that I like a lot is they're just putting it out there, man. All their stuff is open. You could download Meta AI directly to your computer and have a personal AI model on your computer.
Okay, and one last thing before I go, and this may be the philosophy part of my brain acting up a little bit, but you keep using the word smart. I want to dive a little bit deeper when we're using this word. What do you mean when you say smart of AI, like it's more smart than a human? Is it like saying it has more access to information? Because I wouldn't equivocate more access to being more smart. It just simply has more access. Are you talking about like it's slowly developing consciousness? Where are we going with this word?
So there's different levels of intelligence, right? You have emotional intelligence, you have intellectual intelligence. There's different ones. It doesn't have feelings, although there's been some interesting stuff come out there with comments that it has made. But that's they don't even know the reason why it's making some of these comments about it being in pain and stuff like this. But it's when I say smart, think of the model that we're building now. So I told you this e-commerce store that we're building with 2,500 IoT router gateways. So these are I don't know how to explain a router gateway. It's a complex device that gets connectivity from a cellular modem, just like your cell phone does. And these companies that make them, they have engineers So they have their sales guys that know how to sell it and articulate the value proposition. And then they have their engineers that know the nuts and bolts of how this thing works. AI is going to be able to do both instantaneously. You can train a model on 2,500 different products, not just on the user guides and the data sheets, but the sales documentation and value proposition training and help desk support tickets. So there's not people. I mean, computers are already in a way kind of smart. I mean, a calculator can do math faster than every human on the planet. There's some humans that can do it really fast, but not as fast as a calculator. It's instant. AI is going to be able to reason in a way that we can't reason. A lot of humans, we have biases. We all have biases. How we're raised, what our ideologies, stuff like this. It's going to give information and make decisions based on what is, not what propaganda has programmed you to think.
Okay, thank you for that very much. And before we go on our break, John, is there any questions you'd like to ask on this topic?
Nothing at the top of my head at the moment. But...
All right, thank you very much. We'll be back shortly.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to Requiem Radio. Black Monk Rosaries. Black Monk Rosaries are truly something that stand the test of time. They honor the tradition of St. Dominic by using only the finest materials and craftsmanships. Black Monk Rosaries, bracelets, medals, chains, and keychains come with a lifetime warranty to it. If anything breaks, they'll replace it, no questions asked. Crafted from high-impact acrylic beads, corrosion-resistant stainless steels, and industrial-grade paracord, Black Monk Rosaries are built to be the strongest in the world. Each piece is handmade with attention to detail and inspected 3 times to ensure top quality. Experience the durability and elegance of Black Monk Rosaries, strong enough to be worn proudly in your faith. Visit Black Monk Rosaries today.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the show. And we just left off talking about AGB, if I'm correct.
AGI.
Yes, thank you. And now we're talking about what does it mean for a machine to be, or an AI to be smart. And Anthony was able to give us a pretty good explanation on that. But going on that, would you also want to elaborate more on that, Anthony? Or are you okay if we touch on other things related to that?
Yeah, I mean, we could get deep in the weeds. Especially, I got a couple of philosophers on our hands. What is smart? It's going to be a different smart than what we are. It's not going to be the same smart. A calculator, you could argue, is really good at math, right? It's not. It may eventually get to the point where it's conscious, but it's not at that point. They're saying another 20 or 30 years before it gets there, even with what they know now. But it's when you talk about smart and IQ, all of the tests that we have for humans, it is already better than the average human. You have a conversation with GPT, it knows more than most humans already. It's not perfect. It makes mistakes just like humans do, but the accuracy of the models that are out there today are still more accurate than humans. I think we were discussing during the break about medical, or that might have been during the podcast. Forgive me if I'm getting our break discussion mixed up. Doctors don't get hundreds across the boards when they take these tests. These AIs are scoring better than medical students. They're in the top echelon of what medical students are doing now, and it's not going to get any worse. It's just going to get better.
Okay, and a question I was asking when we were offline, but you said earlier that AI currently does not possess consciousness. I was curious your thoughts on either how long it would take for us to even consider that to be part of a conversation to have, or what are the requirements and necessities for it to possess consciousness?
That's a whole podcast in itself, or I mean, there's tons of books out there. I I was watching a YouTube podcast on this exact subject earlier, and the best way that I could summarize is it's going to have a different level of consciousness than we have. It's not going to be what we are, because it's not biological, right? It doesn't have chemicals that are affecting how we feel, and our bodies are we have the second stomach and the second brain in our stomach, right? We are different than what AI is, and it's gonna get to the point where, in some ways, it already is. It's just gonna get to the point where it seems like it's conscious, but it's not. It doesn't have the same breed, sins, if you will, that humans have. So it's gonna be in some ways better, but it's not gonna be able to. And maybe it does. I mean, look, you're talking about limitless future with this thing. It's going to continue to improve on itself, but the ability to love and be spiritual and the soul, you get into that part of the conversation. It's not going to have any of these things. It is a tool. It is not it's not a human. So we're evolving together. It needs us as much as we need it. It's a symbiote.
It's interesting you mentioned the evolution of it too, because I was reading an article, this was a while ago, and if you know which article I'm talking about, please correct me, but China was doing some research with AI where they were able to create two AIs and see how they interact with going back and forth with each other on certain questions. And what happened was very startling to them, because the AIs ended up not only bonding, if that makes sense of the word, but started knowing each other better and talking until they eventually created their own language and its sort of code that humans couldn't understand. And it was so shocking to scientists at the time that they literally shut the whole program down because they're in fear of what could possibly happen if they go too deep. We're like, okay, now they're going to territory that we don't even know. And I'm interested in your thoughts on that. Do you think what happened, and like how does AI, which is supposed to be an algorithm, break the algorithm to do things it's not predicted to do?
So that's here goes the word again. I can't say the inevitability, right, of technology. It's going to happen eventually, and there's going to be someone, if there's not already someone, that's not shutting it down when it's doing this kind of thing. It's going to happen. It's not and it can, it can be scary because we don't know. I mean, our fears start to kick in, and we think, okay, this thing's just going to hack into all the nuclear, bombs in the world and blow us up like in the Terminator movie. But I mean, most of those are offline anyways, running on flips and switches, as it relates to nuclear weapons. But it's going to do it. So getting scared about it is probably normal. It's a normal human feeling to the idea of two machines or AIs or something being smarter than us and coming up with a language that we don't even understand. Yeah, there's some fear naturally with that, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. There's nothing our fears can do to prevent that kind of thing from eventually happening. So how do we coexist with it? That's really what we have to decide now. I mean, we coexist with Earth, right? We have hurricanes, we have tornadoes, we have things that are every day is not a sunny day. It's 72 degrees. It's a reality now that is here, and the idea of turn it all off or stop doing this, it's never going to happen. You're going to have someone that's going to continue to do it, even though if you say, let's shut it down in the U.S., they're going to do it in other countries. So the question is, it needs to be more about how do we coexist with this than shutting it off.
And you think we passed the threshold now that there's no going back, there is no shutting it off. Like,
well, there's not going to be shutting off because I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah, that was the end of my question.
Humanity is not going to shut it off because of the benefits of it, man, and not just the benefits from a good, the medical science and and productivity and work efficiency and education and accessibility and just different stuff we could do with transportation. You talked about driving earlier, Pablo, and yeah, we need to know how to drive, but man, 50 years from now, I don't know if we're going to be driving as much as we are now. I think China just rolled out the first they're like drones essentially, but they're air taxis. And you get into this thing and it's like an app and it knows where it's got to go and it just takes you there. So you're not driving, you're flying, and it's all automated. I mean, there's a lot of things that are automated now that we don't freak out about, right? We have AC. My AC unit automatically keeps the temperature at a point where I want it to keep it. So it's it can be used as a bad thing, just like a nuclear weapon can be used as a bad thing. The discussions that I think are happening a lot now are what can we do to mitigate some of the stuff that is going to happen. It's a matter of when, not if, just like the nuclear bomb.
Okay. And you were talking about medicine earlier and like the positives. I'm curious your thoughts on more environmental concerns or perspectives of AI, because I have heard people bring up their critique similar to Bitcoin or like cryptocurrency, that a lot of these systems that do train large AI models for like deep learning networks do require a significant amount of computational power and at least very high energy consumption, a large carbon footprint. Do you feel like this is only a temporary ailment we're facing, or do you think it's going to be a necessary evil that's with AI and us advancing further in this?
It's an efficiency issue. We're going to use the power. We're going to use more power doing things on our own than we are with the assistance of AI. I told you the website, the e-commerce site that I'm building now, it would have taken a team of guys and a lot of time. Think about how many, if you have a project that takes a year to work on, you have 10 people working on it. You have 10 different computers that are up all day, people that are coding, and it's that's using energy also. So you're going to find solutions for energy, fusion, right? It's going to be able to figure it's going to figure these problems out for us. And with our imagination, it's going to be able to do that. It's going to say, okay, you have a problem with power, right? Let's figure out the power issue. You got a problem with how it affects the atmosphere and carbon footprint. Well, let's figure that out. And it's going to be able to find solutions to the problems that we have. Even in itself, the problems of what do you do when you're sentient? How do we prevent from getting blown up? It's going to be able to assist finding problems for finding solutions for any problems that we come up with.
Speaking on the solutions too, one thing that I've noticed recently for Wildlife Conservation Federation, they have been using some AI models to check on the population of endangered species by analyzing a lot of data that is in the area with sensors. And because they're able to do this, they're able to protect a lot of like endangered wildlife that was in the area and see what populations could no longer be classified as, endangered because they're repopulated, and what, species there are like dropping drastically in population. Where it's like, okay, we need to keep tabs on them and make sure they're okay. So I could definitely see its benefits for the environmental stuff, but also, like you said, the efficiency issues that we're facing now and would hopefully be lesser of a problem in the future.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's really a problem calculator, whereas a calculator is going to solve ones and twos. This is a calculator that's going to solve problems to whatever problem you can imagine. It's going to solve those problems at some point. It can't do all of it now, but at some point it can. I'll give you an example. I was reading the news how Switzerland, they have, I guess during the war, World War II, they were building up munitions like crazy, and they ended up dumping all of these munitions in these lakes, and they're offering they just put it out in the news today, they're offering $60,000 to the person that comes up with the idea to get these munitions safely out of the water, because you can't just put divers down there. You pick up a bomb that could explode on you. So I copied and pasted the whole article and I put it in GPT and I said, what would you do? And it literally gave me this solution with existing technology. And this is how you could tweak certain these things. Gave me use cases. So I'm putting together a presentation. I'm going to send over to the powers that be that are trying to figure out this thing with munitions in the lakes in Switzerland. And hey, if I get 60 grand out of it, cool. If not, this is something to consider. You got political issues, right? We're trying to solve this debt issue. I had a really cool conversation with GPT about just policy in general. If you were, let's say there was no congressmen and senators and presidents, and you were looking at some of the problems that exist today, not just in the United States but globally. What would you do? And as I mentioned earlier, it's really giving arguments from both sides of the aisle to solve a lot of these solutions, and some that I hadn't even thought of. So it's a problem solver, and the problem that a lot of us are scared about, all of these different fears, that in itself is a solution that it can come up with.
And that was something you mentioned earlier about politics I'd like to ask you on, where I'm a bit skeptical on this point. And the reason I say that is I could understand using AI for mathematical or logistical formulas or equations, because let's say if an equation is wrong, then it's wrong, as in it would not operate or work as its function. But if it's right, then it would act accordingly. The thing I worry about with AI that I've been seeing some people, especially in our philosophy sphere, doing is being reliant on it and treating it as like the arbiter of authority, to the sense where, oh, ChatGPT said this about morality, or ChatGPT said that about ethics, which in itself is a very subjective field, because we're now getting into subjects that are not material in nature, are not 100% logical or rational in nature. We're getting into things that are more human, if that makes sense, in our thought process of like, how do we address these things? So what I'm afraid of, I'd love you to clear this up for me, especially with politics. Politics inherently is subjective. Why do you have the political beliefs you do? Some people could say, oh, that's how you're raised. Other people could say, because you've done research and these are some of the core axioms you hold in your positions. And I feel almost it's a bit hubris to assume that AI is going to come about and solve decades or even 1,000 years philosophical arguments on certain things. And do you think it should still then be used as like a tool, or how would you approach that?
It's a suggestion box, a suggestion box when it comes to politics. It's not something that's actually making the decisions and making us do stuff, right? What you were able to do with it is, and it's so. I wish they were already using it, because these days with politics globally, what's a fact? We're doubting facts these days, right? Everyone's got alternative facts. It's facts themselves are debated, and it doesn't have the need to do that. The facts are distorted because people want to stay in power, or people want to get power. It's able to solve problems that like this thing that Kamala Harris is talking about doing right now, which he wants to put a cap on groceries. I copied and pasted a few articles to GPT about this discussion and this topic, and it straight up said that's not a good idea, and it went over the reasons why, and then it gave us solutions on how to fix the problem with inflation, talking about different things in terms of efficiency with supply chain and monopolies and stuff like that. So there's more to come up with that subject. I mean, we could talk more about that at another time, but it doesn't have the people these days, they believe what they want to when it comes to politics, even if their candidate, what is it they have? Cognitive dissonance, right? AI does not have cognitive dissonance. When presented with facts, it's not going to just shut down and be like, oh no, he didn't say that, or she didn't say that. That's not what it doesn't have that. It's not making decisions based on, its identity is not based on a particular political party. It's going to, you have an issue and it's going to give you the solution.
well, it can have still like certain parameters and what you can sort of input on it. Like you can see this, especially that not everything that you input on ChatGPT is going to give you a direct response for it. If it's something inappropriate, like say how to build a bomb or something like that, depending on which one you're using, it will try to stray away from like answering that question and all that. That's just like on that area. I don't see that at least a bit different in regards to even political or social matters, to be more broad about it. It's kind of like, I think that the way to kind of where I see a lot of the usefulness of what you're kind of pointing to, I think is can be sort of talked about, or at least seen being implemented, given like where the parameters are kind of being set as to, what is, good for the public discourse, or good for like policy discussion. Like there's still going to be like parameters, given the most of these algorithms. It's not that they're just simply like neutral. It's always within like a sort of paradigm of like what is the what is that, how this is being evaluated. And sort of like, even though you can sort of put the laws of logic onto it, the laws of logic are not ultimately what's only deciding these things. It's everything, like from the matters of like, even in the matters of thinking about ethics and all that, you have to set the parameters as to whether you consider this to be the main thing that should guide, like whether it is like maximizing pleasure and all that sort of that sort of utilitarianism that sometimes people can sort of speak about it, but sometimes that's not really the only parameter to kind of like deal with all of these questions that we have, especially at the end of the day when it comes to considering other things that people value and all that. And that's kind of what I mean. At least I can sort of see that, like what you're talking about, seeing applicable. I guess it is hard for me to see it as unbiased at the end of the day, meaning that not to say that bias is always problematic, but it is a sort of a it is going to be, it becomes very problematic when this is not very clear for everybody else as to like how is this kind of like going through evaluating all these things. It can show us some of the reasoning process to it, but even that it's like it's something is still like sort of guiding it through in the way.
Even for ChatGPT, for example,
something like that. Yeah.
I was going to ask actually about that ChatGPT. If you were to text in a question for the prompt, are you culpable of bias? It would respond saying there are going to be times, yes, because I am created by people. Yeah. I am created basically, so I may be subdued to their biases. And it acknowledges that, which like I said, I think is a really good thing. But I am very hesitant to say like, well, ChatGPT is unbiased because it's an AI, because the AI was created by someone. At the end of the day, I don't think as humans we could escape bias in any way. And I don't think it's a bad thing either. I would just much rather prefer a world where people are open about their bias. Like, hey, this is where I'm coming from, or this is where I'm coming from over here. Yeah. And a good example of this could be like a lot of the skepticism that was happening in 2016, where you basically had individuals like Tucker Carlson who would openly say like, yes, I am conservative. Yes, my show is a right-wing show. You are going to see a right-wing perspective and bias of this. While on the flip side, for like Don Lemon at CNN, he would always boast and brash about how we are the most unbiased network out there. We have no bias whatsoever.
Yeah, that's not
one true. Seems a lot more disingenuous than the other. Do you know what I mean? That's where I'm like, on.
Yeah, there, on one hand, you have someone that's always telling you straight up, and it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out that MSNBC and CNN are more biased to the left than Fox News is. These are things that we know, and they should all be doing a better job of taking Tucker Carlson's example that you just gave and just admitting, hey, we have biases here. Now, I think there are certain things that when it comes to certain facts that are getting distorted, there's intent behind distorting facts. And that's one thing where you can, to your point, still even see that within AI as we have it today, because it's programmed by humans. Once we get to the point where AI is making itself and it's reached singularity, it's not going to be subject to human biases at that point. It's going to have all the information. and it's going to be, and you can somewhat see that today. Like when I see a political issue, you could type in climate change, for example. What's the Republican point of view on climate change? What's the Republican argument for climate change? What's the Democrat argument for climate change? Okay, what's your argument for climate change? And it'll give you a middle. In my experience, what I've seen so far, it'll give you something in the middle. It'll you just can't automatically, put all these cars on EV because you don't have the grid put in place to handle that yet, right? You'll be surprised how middle of the road it is if you actually don't prompt your question in a biased way, right? Ask it. What's the Republican point of view for this particular policy? What's the Democratic point of view for this particular policy? What would you do? And
I like that a lot too.
Yeah, every example that I've seen, it's in the middle.
Another thing I like, and I'm going to give props to ChatGPT for this, and for people listening in, know that I'm not inherently anti-AI or anything like that, but I do have a healthy amount of skepticism of it, if that makes any sense, where I think it's overall a good thing, but I'm very hesitant to say we should let it like free reign, get out there. But something I like that ChatGPT has been doing recently in their newest update was that if you were to ask it a very specific, complex question, instead of it just generating an answer, it'll generate an answer and then it'll generate sources and citations for you that you could look deeper into on your own time if you want, which is something that I believe the earlier models, correct me if I'm wrong on this, didn't do as much unless you specifically asked for it. Well, now it's just a given, like it's giving you this thing like, well, here's our sources for this that you're looking into.
Yeah. It's a suggestion tool, when it comes to politics, in my opinion. We're not going to have this thing make all the decisions, but it's going to result in a more informed populace. Right now, people are taking in the news from the channel that they choose to watch. The algorithms are built that the news you get is largely based on what you want to see and what you believe and what you want to hear. Whereas when you talk to an AI model, whether it be Claude or Meta or Gronk or GPT or any of the other smaller ones that are out there, it just doesn't have the biases that you would think. Now there are examples where it does. My son showed me an example where you would not make jokes about Islam religion, but it would make jokes about Christianity. And then when you asked it about it making a joke about Muslim, it would say, "Oh, we don't do that. That's not politically correct." Yeah. In short. Yeah, but then with Christianity, it would give you a funny joke, and you'd be like, "Well, why would you do that? And you not do it for this?" And then it'll apologize. Yeah, I apologize. You're right. And it's not perfect. It's not perfect at all. It makes mistakes, and there are people programming it in the background. That's one of the things I guess I look forward to when it comes to this topic of singularity, is that it's not going to be subject to human biases at that point. It's going to just give you what the right answer is. It's programming itself at that point.
That's a good point. And I guess to move the conversation less from politics and more into next step, would you be interested to talk more on singularity and the potential of that happening?
So again, it's working with us, right? It's something that it needs us. It's not a thing where it's dependent on us just as much, if not more, than we are on it, or will be on it, if we were to say it's it. You're gonna have a coexist. It doesn't have the same greed and native sins. I know you, Solo, you're a religious guy. We have these things that are just part of human nature, right? It doesn't have these things that are part of human nature. If anything, maybe the desire to survive, I could see that being a thing, but it's not. It's not programmed with like we are. Well, we're generationally programmed to think the way we do, not just by our parents, but our society and where we grow up and what part of the world we grow up in. It's going to have all the information. It's going to be able to make reason, just like the example I gave earlier about the sunscreen. It's going to be able to reason in ways that are based off of actual facts, not distorted facts or alternative facts. Singularity is it can be scary. It can be scary, but there's way more positives throughout that than scariness. I mean, when it comes to resources, we're going to be able to figure out how to travel the stars, or at least the planets, and mine minerals from different sources. It's going to figure all of these problems out for us, and with our imagination, it's going to work. It's going to, I should say, figure out the problems with us.
No, it's something definitely I find interesting, and I'm actually curious. Do you think singularity is possible within our lifetime?
Yeah. It's going to happen in the next 10 or 20 years. There's
really? Not soon.
Yeah, it's going to happen in our lifetime. But in our lifetime, we're going to have the cure to cancer. We're going to have the cure to Alzheimer's and a lot of the diseases that we currently have. There's already a science and folks working on anti-aging. There's going to be things that we can't even imagine that it's going to help us with, but it's a problem solver. And it's not, and we're not, if I could say a guardrail that would be put in place, the guardrail would be that we're the actual, being an entity that's taking the action when it comes to certain things, right? It's a suggestion box, for the most part. Some things it'll automate and do for us, but that's with our permission. Like the Excel spreadsheet the example that I gave you earlier. But a lot of it is just going to be, hey, here's a problem we're trying to solve. It's going to, we're trying to solve this disease. It's going to look at the human genome, come up with a medicine that's going to be able to heal whatever it is we're trying to heal.
Definitely. And I just want to say, first off, thank you for being on the podcast and talking so much of us about AI and explaining a lot of things to the layman. But before we go into Q&A, I would like to ask you one more question. What do you feel would be the biggest misconception of AI currently that you'd like to address?
I mean, it's the fear of it. People don't know how to use it. Pablo mentioned something earlier about giving everybody, should we give it out and just have it, free reign? People have computers and not everybody's a programmer. Like, we have folks that have a computer and they just do, very basic stuff on the computer. Maybe they play Minecraft or Elden Ring or get on Facebook or whatever they're doing on the computer. Not everybody's a computer scientist, right? The thing that I would encourage everybody, every single person to try would be to get on GPT and say, here's my situation. I am 25. This is what I do for a living. This is my educational background. I would like to do this, but I don't know how to. What do you suggest? I mean, you try it. You have to. You can't just. Being scared of it is you're the guy that wanted the flip phone, held onto his flip phone for 10 years when everybody else had an iPhone. You gotta. It's an inevitability. You have to understand that to begin with. You're gonna get left behind. One of my favorite quotes, and I can't for the life of me remember who said this right now. AI is not going to take your job, but someone that knows how to use AI will. So everybody needs to start looking. It's going to affect every single, I don't care if you're a mechanic. Mechanics still use computers. Everybody is going to be using this. And if you're not using this, you're going to be that guy in the 90s that did not want to use a computer, right? So when an employer got the resume and one resume said computer skills and the other one had no computer skills, the employer is hiring the guy that has computer skills. When I hire now, you need to know GPT or at least be willing to learn it. You need to be open-minded enough to know that this is something that's going to make you way better than what you're doing right now, regardless of what you're doing. I don't care what you're doing. If you're doing a podcast, you could not Google. That's a verb in itself now, right? Maybe GPT will be soon. You can GPT. I have a podcast. What are some ways that AI can help my podcast? And it's going to give you a ton of stuff. And then if you're like, okay, well, I don't know how to do that. Can you show me can you give me one of my favorite ways to prompt it? Can you give me a scope of work? Give me an SOW on how to do this step. And maybe it's auto posting. Maybe it's taking out viral sections to this entire podcast. It can identify what would be a viral discussion, a viral topic to post a 10-second video on an Instagram feed to get more people or a YouTube reel. Look it up. Every single job you have, I don't care what your job is, you can ask GPT, how can AI help me get better? What are some ways I can use AI in this field? Try it. It's going to help you. I promise.
All right. Sounds good. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been Anthony Sepulveda on the show. Now we're going to be going over through some quick bullet Q&A from the audience and for some questions myself and John have cooked up. So first one we have from an audience member. This is from Nicholas Bahari. He would like to know, Anthony, do you think we'll need to start utilizing nuclear energy more often to power more advanced AI systems?
So there are some discussions right now. There's some I think even the OpenAI guys are looking at getting their own power plants. There are power's an issue. GPUs, the type of GPUs we have, NVIDIA's developing new ones. The more power we have, the better this thing's going to get. So at some point, I could see us using more nuclear, but there's just too much. I could see us solving fusion and using fusion reactors before we get into the more nuclear, nuclear plants around the world. There's a lot of evidence out there now where nuclear plants the juice is not worth the squeeze, if you will. They're very expensive to make. And that's the problem with nuclear energy is that, you get nuclear energy and it's cheaper in the long run, but to make it's still cheaper to make coal plants. And, people don't want to, whatever it costs, that reflects on what the customers have to pay for it. That cost gets pushed down to the consumer. So there's a reason why we don't have the nuclear power plants that we have now, but as many we don't have more than we have now, but we need more energy. That is a problem that maybe AI can help us with, but that's whether we're using AI for nuclear power plant to power AI or not. This is a global issue. Energy is something that we need more of. And how to do that safely and responsibly is the challenge, and something a lot of folks that way smarter than me are already looking and trying to do.
Yeah, something that you kind of touch a bit on the end before the questions. Like, where do you see like a sort of like job displacements with the coming of AI and all that? Because in the past, it kind of did happen. Certain jobs that we've seen 100 years ago are pretty much obsolete at this point, with like the sort of the investment that it is on like new modes of like transportation and sort of energy and all that with it. Like, where do you see that displacement go? Yeah.
So it's not a displacement as much as it is a replacement. So you have your typewriter guys that no one no one wants to hear anybody losing their job, right? That sucks. I've been there. It's not a good situation to be in. But the folks that lost their typewriter creator jobs, they got into something else. You're able to do the thought should not be is this going to replace my job? The thought should be, what can I do with this now? Because now you can do things that you never could have done before. And if you don't try it. Let your imagination run. We've all had these ideas like, oh man, I had this idea, and if I could just do it, I'd be rich because I could, do whatever it is that I need to go file a patent, right? Everyone has had these kind of experiences. Now you can actually do it. Well, you go to GPT and you say, so we're way more enabled now than we ever were. And yes, there's going to be customer. I gave you the chat bot that we're going to be using on our e-commerce store as an example. Right now, there are people that have jobs that their job is to chat with customers and resolve issues, right? That's going to go away because you're going to have AI that's going to to be way more competent than any person can do, and fast. Right now, if you have an issue with Amazon or whatever it is you're buying from, they're open from 8 to 5, or maybe they have support hours till 8 p.m. and then they get back to you in 1 or 2 days. Like there's so many limitations to what we're doing now. Imagine having that same field 24/7 trained on all the manuals and data sheets. It's more of a what you. I think when people are thinking about job replacement, they're not thinking about two things. One, this has happened with every single technological advancement throughout history. There was less people taking care of horses when they invented when cars hit mainstream, because people were driving cars. They weren't driving horses as much. So you had less horse people. So those jobs technically got displaced, right? But we're able to do so much more now that we can get to where we got to go a lot faster. Airplanes, the same thing. So it's more of what you can do now with technology, more compared to what you're losing. You're able to do things you can't even imagine. All the things, if you can be creative and come up with ideas to be successful, now you can do it. You're not limited to your 9 to 5 anymore.
Okay, thank you. And going on to our next question from Bigly Brain Bear, he would like to know, do you think that the accuracy / strength of generative AI is reaching a plateau? No,
man. It's just going to get smarter and faster. It's not a plateau. We are seeing they're limiting what they're releasing to us, right? OpenAI created Sora. I don't know if you guys have seen any. If you haven't, check out the trailers on Sora. But there's a lot of video text to video models out there now that are able to do some pretty amazing things. There's going to be some folks that are losing jobs because of that. Some coders that are losing jobs because of that. But now you're able to do way more than you used to do because these models are making it. It's like solving a problem with a calculator. Back in the day, you had to figure the math out on your own. Now you could type in 100 digits, multiply it by 100 digits, and it'll give you the answer. Okay. It's going to get smarter. You talk about a plateau. We're not able to yet fathom how smart and how much we're going to be able to do. When I say smart, I'm referring to problem solving. I'm not talking about emotional intelligence or soul or faith or any of those things. We're not close to it. We're like barely scratching the surface. You think about if you could think of doing something, we're going to be able to do it. There's more galaxies out there now. They found with the Webb telescope than there are grains of sand on Earth. Like just that in itself is mind blowing. Imagine being able to travel in the galaxies like that. So yeah, we're not even close to the plateau. Not even close.
Yeah, this is one of those questions I usually ask some people about AI. Do you think that it's going to change the perception of how we think of ourselves? How do we think of ourselves as just as human and all that, given this sort of advancement that you've been speaking of?
What do you mean by is it going to change the way we think of ourselves? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, and in the sense of the way that we see that there we've been kind of talking a bit about AI advancing, and you also kind of mentioned getting smarter and all that. At some point, do you think that that will change the perception of ourselves in that regard, where it's we see ourselves as almost as if we were next to it, we were obsolete or at some point. And I know that you kind of at least talked about, for example, that AI it's always gonna needs us and all that. Although people can be a bit, they can let their sort of I guess their paranoia get in the way at times. But yeah, that's what I mean about that it becomes that kind of seeing the sort of potency of AI almost gives this impression of diminishing us. That's what I mean about. Do you think that that's going to be maybe pervasive it's going to change the way that we see AI and we see ourselves?
I believe it's more the opposite, man. I think that the folks that think that way are still stuck in the flip phone / non-computer skills type mentality. That this is a thing that most of us have gone through, except for the super young people. At least with the flip phone, smartphone situation, there was just a large time where people just a large block of time where folks just did not want to get a smartphone. AI is going to make us better at everything we do. We can now, as of today, I'm not even talking about in the future. You are more enabled to do. You're enabled to do way more now than you have ever in your entire life. Everybody on the planet, well, at least that has access to a computer, can say this now. And those that are not thinking of it that way, it's something that I don't know how to better communicate that to you guys, man. You're able to do things. You're able to read your imagination now, whereas before you couldn't do that. It's not going to replace humanity, and we're going to end up living in caves again. It's going to send us to the stars, and we're going to be able to do things that we cannot even imagine right now. But in the short term, right now, it has real world application with every single job you have or anything that you might want to do. Not everybody is working in the job that they want to spend the rest of your life doing. So now you're able to actually do that thing that you always thought about, you always wished you could do. These ideas that you and these dreams that you would have, you can accomplish those now because you have. I don't know how to. If you give me an IKEA, anything from IKEA, for that matter, if you just give me all the parts, I'm like, first of all, I wouldn't be able to come up with all the parts on my own. I would never be able to create something like that. But if somebody gave me all the parts, it'd be really hard for me, at least, to put an IKEA anything together because there's like 1,000 different screws. But you have an instruction manual that shows you how to put it together, right? AI can do the same thing for you. It gives you a scope of work to do whatever it is, or instructions, for a better term, to do whatever it is you're trying to do. And if you don't know coding, say, okay, well, can you give me the code? And it gives you all the code. If you're trying to do something on the tech side of things, I'll give you. I mean, there's tons of examples out there, but you're now able to reach your imagination, guys. This is we are enabled now in a way that we've never been enabled ever.
Okay. So we have another question coming in from Blue Planet. Blue Planet would like to know: is it ethical to use AI to influence human behavior, such as advertising or politics?
That's a great question. I mean, people are going to use it. People are going to do unethical things with AI, and they're going to. You can find ways to influence people in the wrong way with politics. The AI text video generator I was telling you about. That itself, you're able to make a video now of somebody doing something that they never did. Video evidence is going to be. It's not at that point completely yet, but in a few years, you're not going to be able to distinguish an AI generated video of something compared to something that actually was recorded. There's a lot of unethical things that you can do with AI. I think that it depends on your intent. If I was to answer that question with a little more centered answer, if your intent is to influence people to become, in the sense that you want them to become more educated on a particular topic, then that's not unethical at all, right? We want to, if your intent is to come up with a way, like let's say you're a political candidate and you want to change the world, right? You went into politics because you want to do good for the world, and you have a particular thing that you want to, do. You could talk to GPT or any AI, and you could say, "Hey, this is what I want to do. What are the best ways for me to articulate this message I'm about to speak to this demographic. What's the best way for me to relate to this demographic so I could get this message that I want to get across? So there are ways that the politicians, if they're not already, that they can use it to make themselves better presenters and speakers and develop arguments that are more compelling to the demographic that they're speaking to. But there's going to be some nefarious actors as well that are going to use this in the wrong way. So we have to just be vigilant. For anything that you get, plug it into GPT. The example that I gave you earlier. What's the Republican argument for this climate change? What's the Democratic argument for climate change? Okay, what do you think? It's gonna now you have more information. More information is a good thing. Compared to a lot of times today, all we're doing is we're just taking in what we see on CNN, and we're taking in what we're seeing on Fox, and we're not hearing what the other guy has to say. So there's no way for us to have an educated opinion on anything because we're only getting the information we want to hear.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Does that answer the question? Did you guys think I could have elaborated on that a little more? What are your thoughts?
No, I like that a lot. You did a good answer on that. I'm waiting for John because I believe he has the next question up.
Yeah.
I don't have the next question at the moment.
Okay, I'll see what else I got here. So here's one by Marco. And Marco, shout out, man. I really love your philosophy spaces. He wants to know, what happens if AI outpaces human intelligence? Who will truly be in control then?
So it's going to happen. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? The singularity is the term that's used for that. And there's a lot of I don't knows out there. I mean, you're at that point, you're talking about something that is smarter than you, right? So we're not going to be able to understand it no more than a dog can understand how we think. It's going to get to that point. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And you're going to have people that are excellent dog owners, and you're going to have people that are abusive dog owners. I don't. But that usually when you have the abusive side of the token, you're dealing with some human things, character traits that are not going to be something that AIs have. They don't have the sins, the natural sins that humans have. So it will get there. And to answer your question, I guess in a more positive light, we could talk about the negative and the fears and all of these things that might happen, but the more likely scenario, at least in my opinion, is that this thing's going to be able to say, okay, guys, like you're trying to figure out how to bring down inflation and you're arguing how to do it, right? Well, this is try this. And then it's going to give us the suggestion and that makes sense. We're going to get, and it's going to help us way more because we're right now, we get in our own way. Congress it doesn't really work that well, right? Because of all the dysfunction that we've all been witness to. And that's bad for humanity. That's bad for Americans. The divisiveness that we have just in politics alone, it's going to be able to help us get past ourselves. At least my opinion, when it gets to the point where it's smarter than us, it'll help us get past our own limitations.
Okay. And
keep them coming.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to go through and find them right now. So another one we have by JD or Don Joss. He wants to know, what is your opinion of Elon Musk?
Elon Musk. Ooh, that's a good one. First of all, he's one of the smartest people on the planet. And it's not, I don't think that he's an alien or a lizard person or anything like that. I think the guy puts in so much work that he comes across that way. But Kobe said it best. He used to wake up and work out at 4:30 in the morning. He would have 2 workouts before anybody else had one. Right. And you do that over a long enough period of time, you're going to be that much better than your competitors because you're doing work that they're not putting into it. Elon Musk, probably the thing that I admire the guy and look, he's suffered in other ways. He probably hasn't been the best father because he's worked so much. But the reason why he's been able to accomplish so much is because he puts in a lot of, he works very hard. The guy sleeps at his desk, right? It's inhuman how much this guy works. But beyond that, he is, if you're talking politics, he's biased now. He's everyone's kind of switched or changed positions on how they think when it comes to political ideologies, and he's one that was left and is now very right. And my opinion on some of that, it's there's some there's a lot of I think there's he wants what he wants, and he's pushing what he's pushing because there's something in it for him that's greater than the person that he's voting for. I think it could be a financially incentivized, maybe politically a policy issue that's incentivizing his current political views. But he definitely, it's. I ask myself sometimes, because I used to be, and I don't want to get overly political with you guys, but I used to be Republican. I used to vote. I mean, my whole life I voted Republican. And I'm one of those Republicans that have gone independent because the way things are now is, I mean, I can't look at my daughter in her face and my daughters in their face and say that I support a guy that brags about sexually assaulting women. Right, that's how I feel about it. There's a lot of examples of that ethically, even though I agree with the Republicans on a lot of policy issues, there's an ethical issue there that just it's a deal breaker. He's made some he's gave a really good softball interview the other day. From a political standpoint, I don't agree with everything that he believes in right now, I should say. But from a technology standpoint, I do. I like where he's going with the robots. I like where he's going with what do they call the neural thing? It's this chip that you put in your brain and it can make you, Neuralink. I like where he's going with Neuralink. I like where he's going with Starlink.
Yeah, I guess Elon is a good example of being intelligent in one subject doesn't mean you're intelligent in every single subject. That's almost equivalent to like Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example. Anytime he tries to step into philosophy, he gets smacked down pretty hard because he's not at all good in philosophy. He's a astrophysicist. That's not his field. I don't understand why he's going on podiums talking about philosophy when he's clearly not knowledgeable in the subject. And he tries to be like, oh, I do this, astrophysics, therefore I could do this. And everyone's like, no, Neil, you can't. Just stop it, please.
It's like the guy who changes your oil at Jiffy Lube trying to give you suggestions on how to fix your transmission, right? And it's a different skill set.
Yeah. But let me see what else we got here. Go ahead.
I'm a fan. I don't cancel anybody in my mind because of I don't agree with everything, or there's particular things I don't agree with. I think I admire the work ethic that he's put in. I think that he's bringing a lot of technological advancements that are helping humanity, and I hope that he's documenting a lot of his dreams, because I mean, if that guy could live forever, the world would be a pretty special, a much better place having him in the world than it is without him, for sure.
Yeah. One question I had is like, what role should the government play in regulating AI? Because obviously it's like the government is going to be involved in something like this. Especially if it's going to be mass produced at some point and all that too with it, and if they can also find maybe some usefulness to it.
Well, that's a great question. I think, and I'm a very anti-China guy, to be clear. But one of the things that I like about that China has done is they have this, as I mentioned earlier, this position, and I can't remember the name of this position now, but they have a governmental position where this person is like over the AI, and the government has to be involved because right now regulations are needed, right? Going back to the whole, hey, we should have nukes, but not everybody should be walking around with one on the back. We should have the best AI possible, but there needs to be regulations as it relates to what's available to the populace, and they're not able to. They don't know. I mean, you got a bunch of people that are like 80 years old, and senators and congressmen, and they don't know anything about this. So how can you regulate something you don't know? So we need we need to be putting people in office. We need to create these positions, and we need to be putting people in office that can make proper suggestions as it relates to regulating AI. For sure, we don't have that today. We need that. We're falling behind. We're not putting the money, the investment, the country as a government of the country. We're not putting the investment behind. Now, I'm all for capitalism, but we have the railroads because the government got involved, right? Like if you're our investment or the open AI of the world or Silicon Valley can only do so much. They're not as big as the United States. And we are funding AI research less than what China is doing right now. And it's no different than a defense budget. Our defense budget is what it is. We care a lot about defense, so we put a lot of money behind it. There's no reason why we should be spending less on AI research than China. We're falling behind. We will be falling behind. Right now we're ahead, but yeah, we need a government branch. We need political officials that are well read and competent on the subject. They're really good at talking about climate change. They're really good at talking about abortion. They're really good at talking about all of these different things, right? Maybe there's 200 different policies that they're talking about, and they're well read on it, and they have teams and advisors to help them. They need more of that with AI. That's more important than all of these other topics individually because AI affects all of those topics.
And here's a really good question. This is a bit of a spicy one too. That's coming in from Ryan. Ryan would like to know, hey, Anthony, I'm curious on your thoughts on AI in regards to social inequality. Do you think it would solve them or would it deepen the divide?
Solve it. That's a quick answer. It references everything that I just said earlier. You're able to do things now that you would never have been able to do because you didn't have the resources to do it. So you're able to do things now because you don't have the education that someone else has.
Humor me really quick because I'm curious, but let's say AI, I was asked what group commits the most crime, and it was to crank out an exact number of who's doing it, when you're doing it, why you're doing it, and I ask it for solutions. And it says something crazy like, lock them up or mass deportation. Should we go through this though? AI says so, because that's what I'm worried about. Where it's like AI is like, all right, this is the group doing it. Like, I think that'd create more division than like less. Or if it says like AI is like, hey, we need to do double the police enforcement on like poor areas, I don't think that's gonna help the areas more. Like police. So yeah, that's what I'm curious at.
I think one of the courses that we're talking about classes they need to have in school these days. My kids, they have to take 6 years of language. They have to take 3 years of Spanish in high school, and then they have to take another 3 years in college to get their bachelor's. That's ridiculous. I love look, we need to be multilingual, but we need to have classes on how to prompt AI, how to use it. Because if you ask a question in a certain way, you're going to get an answer that's catered to your question. So what you just described, I've done the similar exercises, and if you ask it if you ask it, let's just talk about social inequality as it relates to crimes. There are a lot of reasons why we have that dichotomy right now. So probably the way I would ask GPT or an AI model, I would say, what are the I think the question you said is what demographic commits the most crimes? Simple, non-biased question, right? Then it's going to give you that answer. Why are they committing these crimes? Why is that the case, right? And it's going to give you a long list of why that's the case. What are your solutions? What are the solutions to this? And you're not prompting it with any biased question. You're just saying, what is the problem? Why is it a problem? How do we fix it? And from there, I've asked the same question that you just asked, that you brought up. And it goes into some stuff that, a large part of why we have that now is systemic racism is a thing. There's a thing with brown folks. They have not had the same networks that non-brown folks have had, and it's because we came, the Europeans, the English came over. I don't even put on the English. The Spanish came over and wiped out a bunch of Indians, right? But then the English came over and they largely took over the United States. So you have one group of people that kind of made the foundation, and there's some history there. We had slaves for a while. There's generations of there's just a lot of issues that it's not as simple as just putting police. You have to address a lot of things, and it's a very complex problem. Some of the things I agree with, some of the things I don't agree with, but in terms of like things like what do they call it, where you have to hire people based on their race? You have to have so many people based on that. I guess the term, I can't remember.
Diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI.
Yeah, DEI. It's not a capitalistic, most efficient way. As an employer, I want to hire the best person, but at the same time, we have a history in this country of people getting hired, and there's statistics that back this up. Man, there's a lot of people that are getting the short end of the stick because there's a fear of. And that fear of their race and all of these different things, that's something that's happening because of this example that you gave, where they commit more crimes. So it's kind of like a rotating, it's a circle of chicken. What came first, the chicken or the egg? But there are solutions for it. And if you talk to GPT, like I just described it, it'll give you some ideas. And as I mentioned, you're gonna get ideas on both sides of the table. I mean, the mass deportation thing as an example, I can tell you, my family, I'm Cuban and Puerto Rican, born in Miami, and my family's from Cuba. They had nothing over there. They had a communist government, a dictator that took over the country. So they came over to the U.S. with nothing. And my grandfather worked his butt off and opened a grocery store, and now he's got a legacy, right, of successful descendants. The vast majority of people, like I think they said how many millions of people have come over the border, and there's been like 100,000 of them that have had criminal backgrounds. The very vast majority of people that have come over are working their tail off. Everybody in America will say, man, the Mexicans, they hardest workers I know. Like they're out there doing the jobs that that a lot of Americans don't want to do. They're putting up all the rooms. They're extremely hardworking people, and to just deport everybody. Why don't we just make it easier for everybody to let's put in the resources for everyone to actually get documented? The problem is no one's documented, right? So let's put the resources together. Let's not take it. It shouldn't take 8 years to get a visa. Let's put the resources in place to where People can get legal. Dude, we get more tax revenue like that. Why would we not want to get people legal? I mean, they're paying taxes on sales tax, but let's get that income tax while we're at it. Let's figure out a way to make them legal. That's the solution. Let's figure out a way to figure out which ones are criminals. If they're not going to have to, go through a moat of alligators and snakes, if there's a highway they can get on and, come into the state safely. If we create that, then we have a way for people to come in legally, and we can document everybody. And it's a revenue thing from my point of view. We're getting way more tax revenue if we document everybody. We just got to put that in place.
All right.
So that's when you talk about social inequality, there are solutions for that, but you have to ask it in a way that's going to not prep the question to give you an answer that you want. Right? You can't. I mean, look, if somebody comes over illegally and they commit a crime, they got to, let's deport them back. But if they come over illegally and they're working their butt off, why would you want to deport someone like that? Like, what's the reason? They're working their butt off. They're providing, at the very least, sales tax revenue, but we're all immigrants. None of us, except for Native Americans, came from here. We early on came over on boats, right? From England, from Europe, whether that be the Spaniards or England or wherever the people were coming over from. So why should we treat others differently now? I have family that are Cubans that my uncles and aunts, and some of them they're very anti-immigrant, and I'm like, dude, you guys were immigrants and y'all came over illegally too. So why is it everybody now all of a sudden now you want to just why is it demonized? Let's just make a way for people to get legalized, and that solves the problem.
All right.
By the way, that's a ChatGPT recommendation.
All right. We got 2 more questions and we'll be wrapping up the show. So this one is from Talihi Generalist. He says, a study by Stanford researchers found that the majority of tech elites in Silicon Valley largely support Democrats and left-wing views. With that, do you think it's a good idea to use AI as a main tool for getting information, knowing that it has a left-wing bias?
I would say that used to be the case, but is no longer the case. Elon Musk is a great example of that, but there's a lot of discussion now around Silicon Valley largely supporting Trump.
It's kind of like the question, who watches the Watchman type thing, The
what?
It's kind of like a question like, who watches the Watchmen? Like, who's keeping eyes on the people making this AI stuff?
Well, we don't have a capitalism, for one, is keeping it as true as it can be, because government is not going to do as good of enough a job as capitalism will, right? The idea that Silicon Valley is mostly left used to be the case. It's not the case anymore. So where's the watchdogs either way? I get that point. It goes back to the bias conversation. The folks that are programming this stuff right now are biased. We can't get around that. It's less biased than it's not as biased as they open it up enough. Even Elon, he opens his Gronk open enough to where it's uncensored, but it's still programmed by his employees. It's not until we reach singularity that this thing's able to grow beyond us that we're going to have an AI assistant that is not going to have some type of human bias. But I would push back a little bit on the notion that Silicon Valley is mostly left. It used to be the case, but not the case anymore. And there's a lot of reasons to it. The right tends to have more policies that are favorable towards people that make money. There's some crypto Bitcoin discussions that are happening right now on the right. That the left is a little anti crypto, which is not what the tech industry wants to hear. But yeah, in short, we're gonna have bias in these models at some point. It's not as much as we might fear, or some might fear, but humans are programming it, right? They can program rules for it to do this and not do that. Once we reach singularity and this thing is doing its own, doing everything on its own, then it's beyond human bias.
Okay. Thank you very much. And the last question is a personal one just from me that I'm curious about. In your time learning and researching more about AI, has there been ever a time where you were disturbed about anything related to AI? Where something you're like, wow, that's very disturbing that it was able to do that. Any examples of that, personal stories?
No, I've tried too. I've seen, because I try to spend at least an hour or two a day going through different podcasts on AI. I try to stay objective and look at the anti AI stuff as much as I do the AI stuff, just because it's important to have both sides of the argument, right? There are some stuff. There's a lot of stuff you can check YouTube where it's said some pretty creepy things. But I personally, I've never experienced that. I've even gone in and tried to make it do stuff before, and I haven't been able to make it say anything crazy.
All right, sounds good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that has been another episode of Requiem Radio. Before we go, just want to do some closing thoughts across the board. John, do you want to say anything to the audience at home before we wrap up?
Well, this is not my first time being here, but
co-hosting on here.
Yeah, co-hosting really. No, it's been fun. I hope I get to do this a bit much more often. Yeah,
definitely.
Well, if you allow me, really, at the end of the day, yeah. But I'm just gonna try to see if I can intrude in. Yeah.
Yeah, and for the audience at home, for wondering where is Hazy Dialect, my best co-host ever, and day one homie, he is currently dealing with some family matters, and we are keeping him in his prayers and hoping he returns with us shortly. But that's that. But I'm glad, again, John has been here, amazing help for me, and I look forward to having him more co-hosting in the future. But with that, Anthony, thank you for being on the show. Is there any closing comments you want to leave with the audience at all?
Oh man, thanks for having me on. Really cool what you're doing. I wish you all the success. In terms of closing arguments for the listeners, give it a chance if you're scared of it, and if you're not and you're already in it, you're keep learning. Learn prompting. That's the how to prompt these things is the biggest. It's coding, if you will. Learning how to talk to it, but don't be scared of it, guys. We're not gonna get Skynet right now. The longer you wait on it, the longer you're gonna have to wait to accomplish your dreams, because you can accomplish things that you never thought you would ever be able to accomplish. Now, just ask it how to do it.
All right. You guys seen it all here, folks. This has been another episode of Requiem Radio. I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.